Hello and welcome everybody to Asia Pacific Greens Liberation Women's Network series of webinar. And today on 23rd of October, we have Dr. Pasang Dolma Sherpa with us. She is Executive Director of the Center for Indigenous People Research, has been working in the area of climate change and natural resources management with indigenous and local communities, both at national and international levels for more than a decade. She has been involved in climate change negotiation of United States Framework Convention on Climate Change since 2009. Ms. Sherpa did her PhD on climate change education and its interface with indigenous knowledge in Nepal. So welcome, Dr. Pasang. And if you would like to introduce everybody in brief, so you're welcome. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Anita, and thank you all for introducing yourself. As I said, like Pasang Dolma Sherpa, one of the indigenous groups, especially in the mountains. I was brought up in the mountains. I've been working, as I said earlier, that on climate change, particularly with the indigenous issues, and also we have been also closely working with the women's concerns issues in Nepal and also in abroad. I'm also now teaching in the Kathmandu University. I teach in gender equality and social inclusion. So that is also a topic of interest where I could deal with the environmental and climate change issues. I'm also the vice chair in the global IUCN on the theme of CESP. It's a Commission on Ecology, Environment, Economic, Social Policy. Commission on Environment, Economic, Social Policy. I always get confused with the name. And then also the one of the members in the board of the UNESCO World Heritage. So that's how I met many indigenous Aborigines groups from Australia. Somehow that's how you got your name, maybe. So this is the topic of my interest. I have been doing numbers of research on this part, and some of the publications already online, and some of the books are coming up. And currently, I have been elected as a chair of the UNFCCC platform, local communities and indigenous platform, one of the core constituent bodies of UNFCCC, and have been working around the world, 194 countries, and obviously trying to work ourselves with the three main objectives of the platform. One is knowledge sharing, another is capacity building, and then another third part is the climate action and the policies. So with all the knowledge of indigenous people, local communities, and women's, how for the contribution for sustainable management of the resources and ecosystem biodiversity, how we strengthen this knowledge and how we empower our young generation to give the continuity of this knowledge, and then to build the capacity so that we can influence the actions of the climate change and also policies, and start developing the education materials in whole members of the UNFCCC. That is what we have been doing at the global level. Yeah, and national levels, I have been, as I said, I have been doing a little different research in national level, especially implementing this CBMIS, one of the interesting projects for us, community-based monitoring information systems. And in this projects, we try to promote the indigenous knowledge and skills and our traditional monitoring systems and governance of the customary institutions, so which ultimately help for conserving and sustaining and managing the resources and ecosystem and also biodiversity that ultimately help for adaptation and mitigation of climate change, and also having a foundation, the sources of the foundation for the local governments for any kind of initiatives for them to do in the village. And then now we are trying to replicate these projects, CMIS, in other districts as well. because this has been accepted as one of the successful projects in our area in Nepal and Kenya and Nicaragua. This project has invited incorporated government also to be like part of the team, because CBMI Center, like what we have helped is like how we promote the indigenous knowledge and cultural practices that has been ignored in the history of development for many years. So we are incorporating the local governments and also all the other stakeholders that has helped building the CBMI Center now with the local initiatives and the local government. So now in Lamjung, one of the district in Nepal, we have already CBMI Center. You could all welcome to Nepal and visit. And that center has been helping for local government to have all the documentation of the Dura communities, and also resource center for any researchers, students, and also the young generation. So this kind of things we really urgently feel for promotion of more in the future, so that the trend of developments just from outsiders will not have a sustainability. But if we incorporate, if we invite local governments and the local indigenous groups and women's, and that give the continuity because they feel that is there. So that is this concept has I would like to work further in the future. And then we have been also expanding more model area. And the another part is I'm also working with the traditional healing practices in Upper Gorkha in Nepal. And that is also very interesting. We are also trying to make documentary and make a publication of our book available both Nepali and English. The work is like how we promote the indigenous people traditional healing practices. Should I be saying, or I should be stop? I don't know, Anita. How you want to? Is it okay if I just give a continue
You
or
can
make a
continue.
yeah. Yeah, maybe I just give a little brief background of my work and then I can make my presentation ready. But please do stop me if you think like if you want me to. And then customary these traditional healing practices that we have been doing is like in really in Upper Gurkha in Chuni Valley, where it takes almost like 3-4 days just to walk from the motorable road, and where the access of the allopathic and the doctors is hardly there. But still, because the indigenous people, they have their own traditional healing practices that has solved the solved the community. And we really wanted to have a documentation of that, and then also promote and also acknowledge and recognized by the our health ministry. So that is what we have been doing. We have been always incorporating the concerned ministries, like especially in the plant commissions of under the Ministry of Forestry and Forestry and Environment, that we have been doing. Then another part is also now actually I've been leading the coordinating another interesting resource is indigenous knowledge contribution for climate change resilience. As a vice chair of the IUCNs, we have been working in Asia, Africa, Latin America. So for the initial phase, we have chosen Nepal, Kenya, and Guatemala. So we are doing our resource going on actually very initial phase, but ultimately by June 2020 we would like to finish and publish into a small booklets and to be distributed in the IUCN World Congress that is going to be happen in Marseille in France in June 2020. So that expected of more than 100,000 participants around the world who are working on the conservation, environmental, climate change, and biodiversity. So we expect to approach we expect to access and then also distribute our materials and also make a presentation there. I have already booked my side event there. And then another parts we have been also working on the land tenures facilities, land tenure systems like benefit sharing, how indigenous peoples and local communities will have their land tenure security, because in the absence of land tenure security, the customary institutions institution and their self-governance system is really fragile. So considering the very values of recognizing their land tenure so that they can continue their traditional practices, and at least we can protect our knowledge and skills for the young generation. And for that one, we have been also working with the government. Actually, I also work for the Ministry of Environment and Forestry as a social inclusion expert. So in my last work with them was like promoting customary institution as one of the bodies that has contributed for sustainable management of the forest and resources and ecosystems, and to acknowledge. So this kind of initiatives we have been continuing in Nepal. And in long run, we have also we are also working on another big long projects build on that land tenure systems, working with RRI and land tenure facilities. Let's hope that concept note is already accepted, and then we are working on the proposal. If it is accepted, then we'll be working another for a couple of years in a larger scale, incorporating the municipality and local governments, because in local governments now it has in the other community, local government has also a provision of having their own local policies in terms of community management of the forest. So we would like to tie up that and promote that one, so that the people on the ground, especially indigenous people, local community who have been protecting the forest, will have opportunity to promote their cultural practices and continue of their forest management. So maybe I'll stop now, and then if needed, I can speak up more.
You have completed your presentation? Okay, you want to
No?
share? Okay, okay, fine.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you want me to make the presentation now?
Yeah, you can discuss the main points you want to
Okay.
talk
Yeah.
about. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this is just when Rachana approached me like to make a presentation, but I thought like this is the presentations uh, I feel to share with you, like how indigenous and local knowledge has contributed for climate change, and what are the challenges still there. So the one I just explained to you is part of my work in Nepal, and we have also other working with a different different organization. So maybe I'll just share this presentation, and then when you have any questions, I would be happy to address. So shall we continue? Can you please go another slide? Yeah, if you stop me there. So in Nepal's climate change is one of the main concerns for indigenous people and local communities, because we all are aware that the rises of the temperatures, and IPCC report, actually it's a new report, is also coming up in 2019, but this is the report from the 2014, also already projected that if we do not do anything, then there is a possible of high rises of the temperature up to 2 to 4 degrees, and chances of negative severe impacts to the ecosystem and biodiversity. And considering this threat projected by the IPCC, and Nepal as one of the vulnerable countries to the impacts of climate change, and then especially indigenous peoples are forefront to the impacts of climate change despite their contribution. So we have to do something, and it is very important that we all, despite the gender differences, we all need to understand and act to address this. So if you go to the next slide, yeah, and then and for this one, the different resource also shows in Nepal. Also, the resource already shows that indigenous knowledge actually contributed for climate change conservation and ecosystems, and also international different research journals also show that contribution for adaptation and mitigation. And then internationally, it has already been coming up like the campaigns that we have to protect the indigenous knowledge. If you want to protect our earth and environment and nature, very essential, crucial that we should acknowledge the contributor for generation. So that's how this if you could go to the next slide. that different research already shows that a contribution of indigenous knowledge for climate change adaptation and mitigation and climate change, and even Tosper and Parrot. Actually, Tosper is from US, the First Nation author, and he's also professor. And in their different research they have done. Actually, I also present. I was also there one of the presentations. Their research already shows that indigenous language that is embedded the knowledge and skills that contributed for the ecosystem and biodiversity. And then our policies are, when we see our policies, especially both in developed or developing countries, the policies hardly acknowledge that part. And the reason is another resource down there already shows that indigenous people and local traditional members hardly considered as academic and public discourse on climate change. That has been one of the reasons why the knowledge is still not been valued, no? So in one way, on the ground level, there are a lot of contribution from indigenous and local communities and traditional skills and knowledge for conservation of resources and management and ecosystem biodiversity. But on the other hand, their role and contribution has been hardly acknowledged at the discourse, in the policy labels and academic discourse. So this has been one of the hindrances why the important facts is not coming up and reflection in our policy and the material and the actions. So if you go to the next slides, there are so many scopes, the indigenous and local traditionals that has contributed. If you see language is not just a made of communication. Language is a source of knowledge. Language is all skills and all the cultural practices, especially also that been reflected also folklore, songs, handicraft, cultural values, agricultural practices, sustainable management resource. So there are so many scopes of indigenous and traditional knowledge. But the part is been there on one hand, and then hardly been transferred into the policy and the actions. So that is the part which is in reality we have been facing. If you go to this next slide, that all this scope of knowledge and skills that has been reflected through our cultural practices. In just giving the context of Nepal is a very multicultural space. It's a small country, but we have more than 125 caste and ethnicity, and the government of Nepal already acknowledged 59 indigenous groups. And indigenous peoples, they have their own customary institution. The customary institution is the institution that have their own set rules and regulations and own governance systems, and that has been carried out for throughout generations for conservation of management of the resources and forest. So, for example, like Noah is one of the customary institution of Sherpa. The Sherpa is from me, my community, especially from the mountains. The protecting the forests, natural resources, ecosystems, it's all the customary governance system they handle. And each year the leaders, the members, changes, and their roles changes, and all are bound to follow the allocation of the pasture lands, cutting of the timbers or forests, where and how we manage and how we protect. So so like Dapo in Dolpo and Tithit in Magar. So there's like Badgar in Tharu. There's so many customary institution, but this customary institution is in threat because legally it's not been recognized. So that has been another challenges for indigenous peoples and the members of the local communities, that how we give the continuity to the future generation. So Nepal is a very rich in cultural diversity. We have as I said earlier, also in the scope of study, like through festival rituals, and songs and language. So that has been really contributed for biodiversity ecosystems, and that ultimately that goes to the climate change resilience and adaptation and mitigation. If you go to the next slide, this is another research that I have done. Baram and Kumal community, just another case study within this community. They have their own, a ritual like Samsari Puja, Bhumi Puja, Kul Puja, Nag Puja. The local communities and the Baram and the Kumal communities in there, they perform this ritual every year. So they worship the biggest tree, the biggest cave, the biggest forest, so that also, so for them to continue continuity of their life, they need to have a big cave, they need to have a big forest, big tree, and different species, different plants. So that's how they have been, managing their forest for many years. Like also from outsiders, people think like, oh right, the Sakela is a festival, the merrymaking, but if you go in depth, the Sakela had their own meaning. They do this function, the celebration during the harvesting and planting season, and then the meaning, the main theme of this festival is worshipping the nature, and contributed for protection and conservation of the nature. They dance, they imitate. When they dance, they imitate as animals, birds, different crops. So this is how the culture and their language, their folklore, their rituals are embedded with the nature. And if you go to the next slide, yeah, if you go zoom a little bit up, upper part, yeah. So this is another study that I shared earlier also in CBMI Center. This is a small community that we have been working on since a few years. That Burn Summit is another customer institutions. Is Burn Summit also they call like another part, but they count it. They renamed this one considering the recommendation from the people as customer institution. The forest they have been protecting almost more than 150 hectares actually. Their own customer institution. It's not not managed by the government, or it's not by the another round of conservation, but it's their own customer institutionally managed forest. And then they have their indigenous forest has like around 500 water for thousands and thousands of people living down the hill. And then they have their own revival. We also work on the revival of the traditional ponds, and then especially for the cattle and wildlife. So if we give the in Gorkha. If you see even in the picture, like maybe you can, if Rasana could make it later on, that the beautiful in the really up in the high mountains, how the indigenous people there, the Lama communities have been protecting their yeah. If you could go down, if you possible now, yeah. No, yeah, that's the one. Yeah. So this is another research which is going on. I'm in the phase of publications. Final validation of my study has already been completed. This is very amazing that all the remaining forest is being protected through their customer institutions, and customer institution help reviving, and also managing the all the herbal medicines. And then the herbal medicines has helped for community, for their well-beings, but at the same time income generations, and also protecting the forest and natural resources, because in the absence of that herbal medicine, in the absence of big forest, the herbal medicine cannot be there. So and all it and then yeah, and so all the ecosystem has been able to maintain because of the herbal medicines. So this is another example. I just wanted to show you how the indigenous knowledge and cultural practices are being done in Nepal. Let me go to the another few countries example. If you go down, Rachana, so this is the example from Thailand. So in Thailand, similar with other indigenous groups around the world, where 39 indigenous groups officially acknowledged, identified. Although unlike in Nepal, they are not really in the same situation as in terms of acknowledgement, official acknowledgement in Thailand. However, the community themselves acknowledge, identify 38 indigenous groups. Karen is one of the largest groups in Thailand. and then if you go to the current community, it is very, very amazing how they are living in the forest with the natures. And they have their proverbs like all thi q tao thi. If you say like that, then they believe like if you drink water from the your community, you have to protect, preserve it. So that means a lot of meaning is there. If you want to drink water, you not just stop the water like in the city, but you have to protect, preserve, make it clean, make it, make the sources of the waters, make sure the trees are there, make sure the water remains there. So that this proverb knowledge is been transferred to the young generation. Or q tao ko, if you say like that, if you use the forest for your livelihoods, forest for your food, forest for timber, forest for fodder, then you have to take care of the forest. So this kind of proverbs is strongly already shows how meaningful are there. So now the current community, they already started giving this knowledge to the young generation through their formal and non-formal education. So in another example from the same community, that the sacred forest of current community in Thailand. So the umbilical cord, when the baby is born, the umbilical cord is put in the bamboo, and as shown in the picture, is tied to the tree. So the person takes care of that tree throughout his life. But if the person dies, his or soul goes back to the tree and lives there. So this concept has protected thousands, hundreds of trees in the forest. So the little tree is been tied this umbilical cord, and the tree grows bigger, 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 and lives there till and believing like till the person alive, and even the person dies, the family believes their son or daughter is still there. So this knowledge, the indigenous contribution, our culture has really contributed. This already shows the contributed for management of the resources. So if you go to another slide, this is just another examples, the gold mine in Philippines, that also shows like how the indigenous knowledge they have, they're managing the gold mines without any hampering the ecosystem and fragiles of the ecosystems and the biodiversity. This is the tunnel that where they all make with their hands and collect the flakes, the raw materials for the gold, and make it gold flakes. And this is the paddy field, as you may know already, the local traditional knowledge. If you go down another part, Anita, how much time I have?
You
Do I
have
have
20,
time?
25 minutes.
Okay, I have plenty time.
Yeah, and
Okay,
question answer round will be in 25 minutes.
okay, that's great. So if you go, this is actually another I was part of the discussion in this group, so I took this picture and I made this picture actually. uh, it's also another customer institution in Africa. In Africa also, no, not this in Africa, sorry, in Asia, in Indonesia. And Indonesia also, you can see like in Indonesia, amazing part is like some of the customary forest is been legally handled to the community by the government. So this has helped them to continue their practices. uh, so this is one of the customer institutions, Katomengum Gam in Indonesia, where they have sustainably managed the forest. So these forests, they have their own regulation for 3 years in the sacred sites. You can see in the upper part, on the upper part, they have their forests, and they have they harvest ritual every day. They have every year, and they contribute. The customer institution contributed for the conservation of natural resources. Allowing to cut the tree, but also protect the sacred site. They have also different clusters where they do not touch any trees, or where they recycle trees, where they plant trees after cutting. They have their own regulations. The customary laws and also very strong, because if someone do not follow their governance system, they have their own paying competition for violation of the rules. They give a jar, either jar or cups or chicken, pigs, money or wine, or like they have their flexibility of paying their if they violate their customary governance. But as I was hearing from the community that most of the community, because they are the one who build that customary governance and rules and regulations, so they always obey and they do not violate, because they believe that is their own rules, and the rules they have formed not from the imposed from the top down approach, no. So so similarly, like sharing the fruits, like they have their own system of collecting the seasonal fruits and sharing, and for selling, not for selling but sharing among, and even the hunted animals is also there for not for sale but for sharing, and plants and paddies also for not for sale. So this kind of customary institutions that has really protected for conserve the biodiversity and natural resources. So this is the case from the Indonesia. So and similar cases also found in Africa. When I was traveling in different parts in Africa, these are the customer institution that is found in Nepal or in Indonesia or in the Philippines or in Thailand. Also in very similar is found in Latin America and Africa. So they when there's a customer institution, they always feel that is their own. So they do not feel like we are burdened with the impose of the rules and regulations as we have normally seen in our day-to-day life. So this is the one of the interesting part. So however, there are so many challenges, and that we are not free from challenges. So one of the challenges, maybe I'm from the education backgrounds, I could see like one of the most challenges is our education, our legal provision and practices. Our education has been developed in such a way that it's more influenced from the Western values and more kind of center oriented, top down oriented, never given opportunity the local values, local knowledge, local indigenous knowledge, our cultural practices. And the children are brought up in such a way that they are aloof from their own communities. So this has been really big hindrances for transferring our the indigenous knowledge to the young generation. And then you can also see in the examples that for fair selection, everyone has to take the same example, please climb that tree. So this kind of and then you can see this in box also, one size fits to all. This kind of education systems has been one of the most hindrances for continuity of our cultural practice, especially in Nepal. If you could see, like after 1990s, in 1950s, when Nepal started coming up with the modern educations, instead of acknowledging our own values, what Nepal did is just welcoming the Western. Into that time, the British India curriculum just accepted, just without considering anything, what education we needed. So that kind of approach continue, and then the Western values, Western education keep on influencing. And then now in this time, we can hardly see, like especially in the cities, they are really aloof from their local values and culture. So this challenges has been one of the hindrances for continuity of indigenous knowledge and culture. So if you go down another slide. So actually, this is part of my PhD thesis also. I just borrowed this slides from my my academic resource, that we have in education has been heavily influenced from John Dewey's, Vygotsky's and Habermas theories in Nepal or abroad or any part of the. That's how in education. So in education, we have been always influenced from Western theories. Western theories has also like especially in Habermas theories and Vygotsky's, that also talk more about the culture and social. That is very good part, no? But it has kind of loop in linking with the indigenous worldviews. They have talked about we have to be critical, we have to be more aware about our surrounding, but their connection is been a little bit been lost there. So when we are critical aware, we have to be critical. Now I'm proposing that when we are critical, we have to be critical, how our knowledge is in a critical situation. So I try to balance like our Western values with our indigenous worldviews, so that our children will also be competent in the global, as been transfer of the knowledge of the Western values in the Western education that has almost governed the world, but at the same time balancing with our indigenous knowledge and values, so they are attached and they are more linked with their local grounds, you know. So they will also look up and look up our own values and respect our elders and respect our cultures, and that is the best way of like balancing and long term for sustaining our children's knowledge and contribution for our whole ecosystem and knowledge. If you go to the next slide, uh, if you could scroll down, and then another, Nepal is not only that one, even in India, you know. I just borrowed one of this slide from my friend Puravi, who's been doing indigenous knowledge and making a film in whole in India, how indigenous peoples they have been contributing for sustainable management of resources. Even in India now, you can see like in mainstreaming school educations, they are isolating the tribal kids from speaking mother tongue and culture and cultural practices. That has what happened to that one. Then they are already alienating from them from their own culture and environment, or failing to capture the significance of language and nature conservation. So this is how what we have been doing. I mean, this is what our whole trend of education. This is what that is why the emergence concept of that. You know, when you mainstreaming the school, should not forget to balance our own values. So if you go down in another next slide, the next slide also shows that we have so much knowledge in the ground on the ground, so much knowledge our forefathers have been contributing for remaining forests, conservation management, but we always seek the solution outside. So I was like coming up with this one that there are so much knowledge for even IPCC report also talks about indigenous communities and local practices have contributed for adaptation climate change, and there's no acknowledgement in the relevant policy and programs. We are always seeking knowledge outside, but there's so much knowledge inside that we totally forget. So the concept of etik and imic is there, so we have to watchful, we have to be critical, as different theories says we have to be critical, but we have to be critical the critical situation of our disappearing our values and how we connect that one. This is the next one is almost my last slides, but I can speak for a couple of minutes more on this one. So perhaps this is one of the reasons why the urgent need of indigenous peoples and local communities, our knowledge systems has to be in the mainstream of the climate change negotiation. And as I said earlier, also Anita also mentioned, I have been following UNFCCC since 2009. I have been following very closely. I was also chairing the different session earlier. I was also chair of the International Indigenous People Forum on Climate Change. I was also working in the board of the World Bank almost for 6 years within the 47 countries. I was also working on the board in the UN rate programs. So with all my knowledge and contribution and my experience already shows that how dear we supposed to be, with how need of urgent need of incorporating and valuing our local values, that to be in the mainstream of the climate change. So in 2015, maybe you are aware that Paris agreements for the first time adopted local communities and indigenous peoples platform of the UNFCCC. The outcome of the and then the adoption has been in recently in Katowice to COP24 49 session of the Substa. It acknowledged the outcome of the COP to be implemented to meet the three main goal of the LC. So the decision of the local community indigenous people platform in Poland has come up to the exchange of knowledge practices for climate change mitigation adaptation that has given a bigger opportunity. In June 2019 in Germany, the first facility working group meeting held. So I was actually nominated from Asia, and there were so many friends from 7 regions, from Africa, Latin America, Russia, Northern America, the Central America, and North and South America, and Africa. So we all together come up with our representative, and I was nominated from Asia. So later in Germany in June 2019, after the election, I have been nominated as a global co-chair. So this is if you see the picture down, this is of my first session chairing the UNFCCC events on LC. So my next to my colleague is co-chair. He's also co-chairing the governments. So this is a platform for the first time given indigenous peoples and local community representative as an equal status as a government. So if you could see the two ladies at the side, they are helping from the UNFCCC secretary to the LC for to function of these three function to implement the three function of the LC. So this is the highest. I actually, if you are interested, you can also listen to my interview. It's been captured by a couple of media internationally, also in Bonn, in television and also in radio. Maybe I can send some of the link in to Archana. I also shared in the and then my interview was translated into 30 languages around the world. That because LCIP is the historical, historically is a achievement of indigenous people and local communities in the journey of coming up with addressing the rights of indigenous people and local communities since 1992. So when the UNFCCC coming started, so in the journey of since 1992, for the first time 2015 when it's been adopted, and now we are in the implementing phase. So in Germany, last time we worked very hard. So me and my co-chair and the whole our facility working groups, 14 members. We are 7 members, and we have also alternatives members, and also different countries, especially in Africa. They also started volunteering. They have started developing their own LCIP network in the region. We are also working on that one with the 3 functions to implement the knowledge, capacity building, and climate policies and action. So all the knowledge here refers to how we indigenous knowledge, local knowledge, the knowledge as some of the knowledge I have already shared with you in my presentation, how we exchange this knowledge, how we exchange our experience so that the decision makers adopt in their policies and implement their respective countries. So as UNFCCC, with the members of 190, almost 92 countries, and when the decision is being adopted, and then they're supposed to implement in their country level. So we are really hope that the gap and challenges, the education materials and the education policy programs, and then all the isolation of the indigenous people, local communities, women in the trend of decision making will be changed, and then bringing like a platform in the core values and develop the actions to change the policies and programs, so that our knowledge and our skills and cultural values will give the continuity and give the opportunity to the young generation to give it continuity. So if you go and then little bit up please before references. Stop. Thank you. And then if you there, like and now we in Germany in June, me and my colleague and our group work very hard. We developed the 5 years action plan that to be implemented at the global, regional, national, and local level to be effective from 2020, and coordination with both inside and outside the constituent bodies of the UNFCCC. So we had already had a layers of meeting with all the outside, like in multilateral, lateral, and all the international organization. At the same time, we are also working very closely with the constituent bodies of the UNFCCC to influence their own action plans in line with the platform. So our next facility working group meeting will be held in Santiago in Chile, 28 to 30, and then followed by the COP 25. And then in the COP25, we are hopeful for adoption of LCIP agenda, the global agenda, so that by 2020 we can implement for 5 years. And maybe, if we really work hard and if we join hands together, and then in the long run, hopefully this LC become a platform for young generation to give a continuity of their experience, knowledge, and also our young generation to get the knowledge through their academic and formal and non-formal education, to value the local knowledge and skills along with the science knowledge, and balance, and for the in harmony for the sustainable management of the resources and the climate change resilience. Yeah, this is my presentation, and this has a hope for many indigenous people and local community around the world. So these are some of the references if you want to have a look that I consulted. If you go down, yeah, if you could go down, please. Yeah, you can just scroll down. These are the different, you can scroll down. Yeah, further go down. Yeah, and thank you very much. And this is the traditional house in Dura community in Lomjung, where we have been working for many years. So this is like the tradition, one of the traditional house made out of all the materials from the forest. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pasang. It was wonderful knowing all the values and education
Thank you.
system and the culture indigenous people are taking forward. And now we'll have, if anybody has any questions for you, we welcome the questions. And I can see Saima is raising the hand. So Saima, can you unmute yourself and put your question forward?
Hello, everybody. It's very great to hear Pasang very deeply and very practically. I just want to ask that how deeply you have worked in the community, and I have seen you have worked on different challenges like education and climate change. So, can you just share that how easily you motivated people to involve in your activities?
Yeah,
because motivation is a very big tool. So if you can please share and highlight some points that how easily you motivated them. Thank you.
Yeah. Should I hear more question, or I can respond right away?
You can respond right away.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for the very interesting question. And actually, this is one of the most challenging part, no? Maybe I will just share some of my experience. As I said, like especially I was working in different sectors before. I was also working in media. I was also working in community managed forests. I was also working in national park. But especially with the climate change and indigenous people, my work was more in depth after 2009. So 2009, when I started becoming for the first time national coordinator for the Nepal Federation of Indigenous Nationalities, that I work almost almost 72 districts out of 75 countries. So that means almost all in Nepal. So we've been working also in globally networking around the world with Indigenous Peoples Network like that. So for the first time in 2009, so for me, like it was very, very challenging, especially with the governments in there. In the governments, in 2009, 2010, talking about the indigenous people, talking about the women's, talking about the Dalits, the marginalized communities, it's never been their priority, So I was actually nominated by from the to represent in the government. So I worked with the government for 6 years. especially with this implementation of RED projects when Nepal government started in 2008. So in the board, there were almost 13 board members. So I was the only one indigenous representatives and the women. So I could say like my voice been hardly heard. I was mere listener, because when I talk, the priority was never given. But slowly, and my engagement was not only limited to national level, because my engagement was also visible in the global. So when the government started seeing me as a global figure, also in the different panels, and maybe they started feeling like, okay, Pastor is just not they're just indigenous representative, just her representative, but she's really willing to do something, and her presence is also acknowledged at the global and also on the ground level in the community. So and then since then we have been working both. I have been in me and my colleagues, we are almost 17 18 I was handling 17 18 staffs around in Nepal, and maybe 7 8 in the national, and then other friends who are in the community. So we have been really working hard that how we started feeling importance of the indigenous knowledge, and then how we, and then one of the values we have been always trying to say, like whenever we have any kind of discourse or any kind of a dialogue, any kind of program or any kind of projects or research, we always try to give the first priority for the engagement of the local government, national government, even in the global level. So this has given the opportunity for the national governments that understanding slowly, because I also understand from the government side that not acknowledging, not accepting indigenous knowledge, indigenous peoples is not only their fault, but also the knowledge. No, so if you don't have any kind of acknowledgement or knowledge feeling for them to realize, it would be very hard for them to motivate. But slowly, when we start feeding them, like bringing them, inviting them in our programs and making them realize. And then 2009 2010, almost 2011, it was very hard time for me to when I was working with the government. But later part, I was very amazed that even government started speaking like, oh, we need to consider indigenous people, and they started inviting me also in their meetings, in their work, in their discourse. No, so this is one of the initiating part. But another part, like community level, is to be big challenging also, because when I was working with NEFIN, and later I started working with the CIPRED, we have been also developing the education materials, and in Nepal, one of the provision in social studies, that 20% of the marks can be developed the local initiatives, local curriculum, so we captured that part, and then we invited the headmasters and also the district education office that we would like to help like developing the local matters, if you could extend your welcome to us. And slowly different layers of dialogue, and then we able to start developing the local materials, and materials with all the stories from the community, and stories about the indigenous people, how they communicate. And the naming was again challenging for us, because we said like indigenous peoples and the climate change the topic. So and then many teachers started saying like, we do not want indigenous peoples only, because if you just put indigenous peoples, and then there are so many other non-indigenous people. So there was a big challenge. So we try to put, okay, indigenous people and local community, because our values is either indigenous or local communities or women, Dalit, whoever, but the knowledge that have been protected, that need to be protected. That is what. And then later we agreed to just put the climate change only, the climate change as a topic of the local curriculum. But in the inside, in the sub content, we put like how indigenous knowledge, how local practices, how our values. So that's how we've been able to incorporate. And then teacher also, the teacher in the initially teacher also opposed, because I understand opposing them is also not their fault, because they also need to be aware, and they need to be we need to build a capacity for understanding the value, the connectivity of local practices nowadays to the climate change initiative. So initially there was a also topic on climate change, and climate change was more on, they were focusing on what is climate change, what are the causes of climate change, what are the greenhouse, that's it. So that is not enough. So we have been training still we have been training. I have another months in the training for the teachers who have been teaching climate change, and we are always been asking them how important the climate change to be incorporated with the local values. So just only teaching what is climate change, what are the causes of climate change, what are the greenhouse gases is not enough to climate change resilience, to for our be our active engagement to our end. So that's how we have been giving training to the headmasters. We are giving training to the teachers. We have been inviting all the government officials, local, national, global level, and educate them on the values of indigenous knowledge and on exchanging knowledge, and they become our actors. So this is how we are motivating, and still the journey is not there, not completed, still long way to go, but at least we have started and it's working out.
Oh, very glad to hear. So you have used a very positive way to involve government and local government, especially the headmasters and other initiatives.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing.
Thanks, Pasang. It was
Welcome.
wonderful
Thank you.
hearing.
Welcome.
Yeah. So anybody else has any question, you're welcome to ask. Yeah, we have Victor. So Victor, yes.
Hello everyone, my name is Victor from Kenya.
Hi.
And, fine, thank you. And I'm part of the Kenyan Greens, and I'm really interested in following the discussions on how indigenous people can be mainstreamed in climate change discourse. Uh, I think what Dr. Pasang said is very right. Sometimes the science sounds so abstract, and most of the communities really, they know that climate is changing, but how do we bring them to the table? How do we mainstream their participation? Indigenous language helps in this way, that it will break down, because they see the changes in how their livelihoods have been taken away, how the rainfall patterns have changed, how the agriculture is not not the same as it used to be. So it makes a case. Let's incorporate and do it very fast. Incorporate indigenous knowledge in climate change education, because the kind of education we have is like Dr. Pasang said, is west leaning. So it doesn't bring in the bring in the people, like how close, how do you bring the human stories to the climate change discourse? That can only happen when you bring out the aspects of people's lives around them, and indigenous knowledge will do a very good job in it. And thank you very much, Dr. Pasang, for this.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Pasang, we have one more question coming up,
Yeah,
so
sure,
you can take both the questions together.
Yeah, sure.
Sarul, you have a question, I think. Rachna, can you help her unmuting the microphone?
I did it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pasang, and for your hard work, and also acknowledging the indigenous people in your country and also in other countries, and protecting their special rights. Here in Mongolian case, it's very interesting because we have nomadic people, herdsmen, who live in the countryside all over Mongolia. And to acknowledge them as an indigenous people is confronting the term which is determined in the Indigenous Peoples Convention of ILO, and also United Nations proclamation.
United Rights of Indigenous Peoples, UNDRIP?
Proclamation of Indigenous Peoples.
Yeah.
The thing is that indigenous people should be colonialized or in confrontation of other nationalities who are also under pressure, etc. Only this condition is not fulfilled in the case of Mongolian herdsmen, because we are the nation from the history and from the culture, all nomadic people. And so like our nation is divided in nomadic people and also sedentary culture people. And originally they were, of course, all nomadic people. So like to bring nomadic herdsmen in the term of indigenous people is really important, actually, in my opinion, to protect their rights to the nature. Yeah, those people are really threatened by mining in Mongolia. So Mongolia is very abundant of natural resources, and so many mining projects, and national and international projects. So their land are always infringed, their rights to land all the time infringed by the mining companies, and a lot of confrontation between them. But it is there is also legal protection at national level is not very well, and at international level it's also not very well protected due to this termination understanding about indigenous people. So my question is, do you have any this kind of similarity problems of defining indigenous people in your country, or probably do you have any experience in other country? And second, is the indigenous people's rights are well protected at your national legal environment? And also, how is the beside this UNESCO proclamation, UNO proclamation and ILO convention, is there any other legal mechanism to protect those people's rights?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, that was very well, thank you for sharing your experience in Mongolia and also the questions. Actually, this experience are it's not exceptional. Many indigenous groups in also in other countries, like in Vietnam or even in struggling in Thailand. Indonesia is a little bit now is a bit progressive because of indigenous movements and their direct negotiation with the presidents. Because during the president election, the indigenous group they started, if you acknowledge our customary institution rights, and they will support. So many indigenous people supported the president in Indonesia, and but obviously what he promised is not all fulfilled, but some part acknowledging the customary institutions, acknowledging the demarcation of the customary institution in Indonesia is already started. So that was another kind of political dialogue and part for acknowledging the indigenous people. But in Indonesia, you could also see in the news that still the plantations, minings, this mangroves forests, rubber plantations that has been started through the different big companies that government had agreements, and that make causes of a dislocation of many indigenous groups, and that was one of the main causes of conflict right now. If you see in the Thailand's case, in Thailand's they have self-acknowledgement recognition of 39 and 38 indigenous groups, and they have their own customary institution, but still the government has not acknowledged them. They have not, even in the national park, because I also work with the UNESCO World but the indigenous people, especially current communities who are in the national parks, still there are a lot of hindrances, boundaries to continue their livelihoods. Many indigenous peoples, even they are banned from continuing their farmings, collecting medicinal plants from the forest. The armies come and catch, and sometimes the few years back, they hold the communities were fired. So that the court is still the issue, the legal issues is still going on in the human rights commissions that violating the indigenous peoples in Thailand. So that has been one of the reason why the some of the national park is not been inscribed as World Heritage. Still the issue is going on. So in the case of Nepal, even in Cameroon, even in Kenya, the situation is the same. In Kenya also, they do not have indigenous people, but in the constitution, they have kind of provision started. So that is also through lobbying and advocacy that acknowledge these tribal people as as ethnic minorities. But in the case of Nepal, the 1990 second act of the NEFDIN is a Nepal Foundation for Indigenous Nationalities for Development. This is the bodies that established by the government of Nepal. The NEFDIN Act of 1990 clearly defined 59 indigenous groups in Nepal officially recognized, but there are many other indigenous peoples who would like to be recognized as indigenous people. So in few years back, the government started coming up when we have an interim constitution. The government started revising of the indigenous people's recognition. So almost 80 additional indigenous 80 indigenous people is been recommended, but the government has not forwarded any decision. So till now we just acknowledge 59. So so defining indigenous peoples, and the government of Nepal, they have already acknowledged indigenous people, but the current constitution of Nepal, very, very confusing. The interim constitution of Nepal before was clearly mentioned indigenous peoples, who are indigenous people like that. But because in Nepal, the government, like in other countries as well, like in most of the African countries, they believe like all are indigenous peoples. That is about their slogans. So many mainstream people in Nepal also started feeling threat because of indigenous people. They started the rights of indigenous people is being misinterpreted, because the indigenous people, they want to continue their collective practices, their rights for continuing of their collective practices, but somehow a misunderstanding from the mainstream of the government that if you rights of the self-determination right, that may cause the fragmentation of the country. This kind of interpretation was there. So now in our new constitution, they started saying like Janjati, Adivasi. Actually, Adivasi Janjati is indigenous people. So they put it like Adivasi is indigenous people, Adivasi Janjati is also indigenous people, and Janjati is also indigenous people. So it's kind of confusing is there. So Nepal government, the new constitution. However, the NEFDIN Act, if we start seeing the NEPAL Act, still 59 indigenous groups are already approved, officially acknowledged. So Nepal government also 2007, Nepal government already voted for ILO Convention 169 and also ratified ILO 169 and then voted for UNDRIP. But the fact they in this international legal provision like ILO Convention 169, Nepal government's policy program supposed to be changed, right, accordingly, but so far there was not. So, in spite the fact of decision in the global levels or the international treaties and convention, which is supposed to in line with the existing laws and policies at the national level, but the national levels laws and policies are not in line with the ILO 169 and UNDRIP, and that has been also another big challenges where the indigenous peoples movement will go on. So the NEFIN, where I used to work before, Nepal Federation of Indigenous Nationalities, they have been really pushing when you ratified ILO 169, when you voted for UN DRIP, then all the legal provision Nepal's at the national and the community level should be in line with that provision. But it's still big dilemma, and its adoption of the ILO is almost 10 years, so I do not know where it go. So there are a lot of things still need to move on, like recognition of for this one, but in line with the Ministry of Environment Forestry, they have already started coming up. Maybe it's because of the negotiation lobbying is a slow process, we need to move on, but somehow the documents started acknowledging the customary institution, like for example forest policy has acknowledged community managed forest like customary institution is one of the can be one of the way out for long term conservation. So this kind of small language is already started being filling up in the policy, but still the changes are still far away. Yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Pasang. We have Sanam there. She is raising her hand. Sanam, can you come up with your question?
I just want something, only one thing. I want to ask that there is a lot of persons and lot of things that create hindrance for you. But one of them, if you thought that this problem was very hard and it's too difficult for you being a woman or being a lady. In spite of that, you faced. So I want to ask, what was the problem and how you faced it?
Okay. Yeah. Well,
please keep it short.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so actually a lot of problems and challenges are there, but if you believe yourself, and this is a very important, and if you believe like that, and then slowly and then it takes time. In my experiences in the working directly with the climate change and indigenous people since 2009, now 19 is almost quite a long time. If you keep on moving your slow pace, the difficulties, because your first your what you call perception, no, oh, you are indigenous, you are women, no, the first sight is already they determine how you behave, no. But if you stand yourself, and if you believe yourself, and if you are really confident that you can influence, and you can slowly making them to understand. For me, like, I feel like despite these challenges and problems, it takes time, but it will move on and then start acknowledging. But still the challenges is not gone, it's still there. But I really strongly believe, like in my experience shows that if you are really confident with your values, and if you're confident with your beliefs, and sooner or later people must understand and accept it. And yeah, despite you are a woman or despite you are IP. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Pasang. It was nice listening to all your efforts done here. And
Yes,
do you have any contact in South Australia, the indigenous community?
Yeah, we have a friend. Maybe I can send you the link. We have she's the chairing of the Chrissy, she's girl Chrissy. She's the coordinating at the moment. Our coordinating for UNESCO World Heritage with the indigenous peoples in the global indigenous peoples. She's from Australia.
Okay, so you can share the email ID with me.
Yeah, sure, Chrissy.
Yeah.
I'll share. Yeah.
So I don't see any more questions around. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you everybody for being part of this webinar. And next, we'll be having next webinar in the month of December. So I would invite you all for the next webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Pasang, and thank you very much for.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
Yeah, it was great having you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Dr. Pasan. And
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Anissa, and thank you, Dr. Pasang.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah.
You can put off the recording, Rachna.